Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Lasting Impact webinar. Good to have you here. My name is Sam Hawkins. I am the project manager with Always Possible. Always Possible is an economic and development agency. We're very pleased to be working on behalf of Surrey County Council to bring you the Lasting Impact programme, which is a series of webinars, workshops and resources for the voluntary and community sector in Surrey. Lasting Impact has been commissioned by the Community and Preventions team at Surrey County Council. Their remit is to work with residents and groups in the county to develop community projects to help everybody lead healthier and more fulfilling lives, as well as to save money. The voluntary and community sector in the county is vibrant, with a large number of organisations doing important work, which I'm sure you'll understand as a watcher with a vested interest in the sector. And what Lasting Impact is trying to do and has been set up to do is to provide, fill some skills gaps, look at specific challenges facing people in the sector at the moment with an idea of building resilience, and represents the investment in the long-term health of the VCSEs locally. For more on the programme, to access more webinars, the resources, including some of the frameworks and materials that Emrys will be going through today, you'll find links to the project's online space, the Possibility Club, in the links provided alongside this video, and also will provide links to the full wide range of support that Surrey County Council provides for VCSEs locally. So thank you, welcome aboard, and without further ado, I will hand over to Emrys, who will be running today's session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Sam, and welcome to our session today, which is all about how to foster a productive team that works for you. So in this session, we'll just have a quick moment about myself, and then we'll have a think about what actually is a team. And then we'll start off with the first of a few different sort of frameworks or models that will be really helpful, I hope, to you to think about, to consider, to utilise in your work with sort of building and fostering productive teams. There'll be opportunities for you to think about the questions that we're posing as well, and then hopefully by the end of the session, by the time you've worked through this video, through this webinar, you'll really have a good understanding of some of the considerations. What we can't do is give you all the answers right now, simply because every team is different, and the individuals that are in there will have their different capabilities, skills, experiences to bring together. But what I hope that today and that this session will bring very much is ideas, thoughts, considerations for doing exactly that, to build and foster a productive team that wants to work for you as well. In particular, work for you as a leader, work for you as an organisation, but also work for you in terms of getting the work out there and making the impact on the communities that we'd all like to see. So a bit more about myself just for a moment. So it's a real pleasure to be back working with VCSEs in Surrey. I lived in Surrey for a couple of years myself. Now moved slightly further north, unfortunately, but actually work nationally on a whole range of programmes, particularly working with non-profit organisations across the country, and indeed globally to an extent with my work with ABE, which is an exam board, and as chair of the Institute of Leadership, which is the global professional body for leaders. So I sort of support, facilitate, strategically direct the organisation with the fellow board members and our executive for sort of over 50,000 leaders around the world. So it's a great opportunity to bring in lots of useful information around leadership, around teams, around the workplaces and projects, and how businesses and organisations are running. There's quite a big membership within public sector and the VCSE sector more broadly, as well as military and health, and indeed commercial organisations as well. So there's quite a few different examples, experiences that I'll bring from my work with them over the last few years. I'm also a fellow at that institute and a fellow at the Chartered Management Institute, and also of the Institute of Directors. So I try to bring in all of the different resources and experiences that they provide as well for me. And all of this builds on an executive MBA program that I did a couple of years ago, as well. So hopefully, if you have any questions during the live section, please feel free to ask away and make use of the resources as well for those that are watching the video on this. So what particularly though is my experience with teams? That's actually probably a good question as to why we're here. So I've run several organizations over the last 15 years, some of them concurrently, and managing teams of people, core teams of a few staff within an organization, teams of over 100 when I'm running festival sites for a week or something. So actually quite a variety of different teams, where they are doing digital programs, whether it's designing, delivering training weekends, or as I say, sort of whole arts festivals across a weekend, or indeed longer term programs. So actually there's lots of different ways to work with those teams, people that work with you full time, people that are working with you freelance, people that might only be with you for a couple of months, or indeed team members that come in just for a day or two. And working with all of those, you've still got to have a level of similarity perhaps actually to how you might manage someone and a team long term, as well as how you get the most out of a team in a short space, because especially when you are bringing, say, project teams together for a very short amount of time, you've still got to understand them, you've still got to be able to work effectively and really productively, especially if you've got thousands of people on a festival site relying on you to make it smooth. So yeah, just putting it out there, there is a context for teams there, and teams do take all sorts of shapes and sizes. So having said that, what is a team? So how would you define a team? Please do take a moment to think about that. So one example, one definition perhaps of a team could be that a team is a group of individuals who come together to achieve a common goal or objective. Team members typically have complementary skills and roles, allowing them to collaborate effectively. So that notion of collaboration, I think, is going to be really important through the rest of this session, and we'll come on to it also in a moment. And something to think about as I talked about those sort of long-term or short-term sort of team members, perhaps also think about, okay, who is your team? Who are your team? They could be direct reports, people that are working to you, or perhaps in a line of reporting. Is it cross-functional? Do they actually not work for you or even in your line of control perhaps, but actually you do need to work with them on an ongoing basis to deliver a project or a program or department functions? So you might have cross-functional team members. Have you got partners? Do you work with other agencies? Do you work with local authorities? Do you work with particular companies to help deliver your services? Are they partners, but actually are they part of your team nonetheless? All have equally valuable input that needs to be made. Are you working with them to achieve that common goal or objective? Are they bringing complementary skills into that team? So yeah, they may not be employed directly by yourselves or your organization, but actually are they a partner? What about clients and service users or volunteers, whichever term you might use for those that engage with your services or perhaps help you deliver local community groups and such like? So they may not be paid, they may not be with you long term, but actually are they someone who's perhaps gone through the program that you're delivering before, or are they regular attendees? Actually, can they be part of your team? Do they help improve the experience for others that come along to participate and experience what you are offering? So all of that is a real consideration for what is a team, and so do think about who is in your team. And we're going to come back to it a little bit later with a bit of a model as well, that once you've had a chance to contemplate on that one. So I mentioned collaboration and collaborating effectively being part of the definition perhaps of what a team is. And that is one of the dimensions of leadership here as well that you can see on screen now. So these dimensions of leadership have been developed by the Institute of Leadership. So very much work in a global context across the board, and are dimensions that absolutely determine and help guide leaders of teams, leaders of projects, leaders of programs of work, whatever you're doing. So whether it is a local community project, whether it is a cookery or catering based project, whether it is coaching, mentoring or counseling with individual clients, each of these sort of different types of services that might be delivered in communities still all share that notion that you need to lead a team to make them happen. So these dimensions of leadership can be considered useful elements that you might think about as a leader. So I'll work through them and we'll end on the collaboration that we've got on here. So first of all, authenticity is essentially what lies between people. So the Institute's research has sort of shown that authentic leaders are trusted, that they have integrity underpinned by lived values, and that they stand out because they challenge themselves and empower others to be the best that they can be. So that's authenticity sort of in a nutshell. As you'll see actually on the screen here underneath each of these dimensions, there are some specific component areas as well. So this one, I'm not going to go through definitions and of all of these along because there's 49 of them here. But as you can see for authenticity, some of the areas or the components that you might think about sort of breaking authenticity down to self-awareness, ethics, integrity, conversation, being supportive, supporting, aligning values, challenging, and also building trust. So each of these, there is links available in the resource attached to this recording and webinar, and you can go and explore the detail of each of those in much more completely free and available online as well. But so that is authenticity, that notion of what lies between, and yeah, you having integrity underpinned by the lived values, and that you challenge yourself and empower others to be the best they can be. So we'll move on to vision now. So vision requires imagination, innovation, and ingenuity as well. So again, research from the Institute has revealed that visionary leaders inspire people to action and achievement. They embrace change and constantly adapt. So they understand risk, link the present to the future, and have an entrepreneurial mindset. So vision isn't just about, oh, what's going to be out there? What's the blue sky? What might we have available? It is about linking to where are you now? And actually, how might you get there? And it is about thinking about that change process. Okay, this is our vision. How are we going to achieve that as we move forward? That entrepreneurial mindset perhaps is a really interesting thing to think about. Actually, what is the change you can do? How might you think big with regard to vision, but actually how might you tangibly get there as well? Again, there's some components breaking down in there, including future readiness. That's quite an interesting thing to think about, actually, preparing yourself and your team members for what the future might hold, and evaluating risk. Again, is that vision something that is possible? Are you thinking far too big? Are there steps to get there, something that's not going to be achievable or appropriate? But actually evaluating the risk around that vision is really important when you are doing that as well. So yeah, so vision, imagination, innovation, ingenuity, all of that plays into vision. So next we have achievement. And achievement means harnessing potential and enabling everyone to achieve great success. So really interesting thing there, that word of everyone. So it's not about an individual achievement necessarily, you as a leader. When you are talking in the context of teams especially, how is it that the team are contributing to that? How is it that your collective success, so everyone's success, is contributing to a project, to great impact within communities? Really think about actually how is everyone being empowered and enabled to contribute to that success. So the research there is showing that achieving leaders are high performers. They very much are ones that are recognized and seen as performing well. They deliver increasingly more challenging and sustainable results, and that they are proud of their work. So if you are a leader that is achieving, you're often going to be really proud of the impact that you're having, and the team that you are enabling in there. Hopefully that is not only delivering sustainable results, having that impact on communities, but it's also challenging you to think about what more can you do, challenging you to go bigger. So yeah, achievement, again, with a number of components within there, factoring in things like the healthy workplace. That's a really interesting, useful component. Actually, it's not just about results at all costs. You've got to think about your team. You've got to think about how you're motivating and keeping that healthy environment in place. That's all about achievement, as well as delivering outcomes and other components there. How you might do that, you might think about coaching within your team. There is certainly a level of resilience that you might need in your team to change and adapt. Adaptability being another one of the components there. Actually, what have you set out to achieve? Do you need to do it differently to make that achievement, or indeed is the achievement actually at the end of it going to be something slightly different? Especially when we're working with clients and service users, those at the other end, perhaps what we're set out to do in a community project is great, but actually the needs of those people might be a little bit different. So adapting and achieving something else will still be achievement. So yeah, harnessing potential and enabling everyone to achieve great success. That's what we mean by achievement. And then ownership is the next one here. So this means about being responsible and accountable. Really important words, I think, there: responsible and accountable. So taking ownership for what you're doing, for the leadership that you are presenting and the team that you are taking forward. So again, looking at the research around this area, it sort of says that leaders who assume ownership keep on learning. So actually, it's not all just about, oh yeah, that's how I'm going to do it, and that's the one way. When you take ownership over something, you are going to keep learning, and you're going to understand the importance of reputation and creating a safe environment. So actually, you take ownership of how that's going to be delivered, of actually how that looks to external partners and those that might be outside of your team, but ensuring that safe environment for the team as well. Sort of perhaps will link to the healthy workplace and the achievement, but you need that safe environment. You need to be able to stick up for your staff and indeed be an important role model for them to aspire to as well. So that is sort of ownership, being responsible through all of those areas and empowering your staff. Managing upwards is a component within there, so that sort of links to that sort of sticking up for your staff if you need to manage expectations or steps, and that is all a part of having that safe environment. Indeed, ownership is about problem solving and critical reflection. Actually, if you are going to take ownership for the good, you also take ownership for the bad or the challenges. How are you going to address that? Thinking about the social responsibility side of it again as well, not just running something, and that has got to be the outcome, but taking ownership for what the outcomes actually are is all in a part of that and important. So yeah, being responsible and accountable. And lastly is collaboration, and I do think is a particularly important area myself. So collaboration within a team context, within a leader leading the team, is all about working effectively with others inside and outside your organization. So mentioned it earlier, this notion that actually your team might not just be your direct employees or reports. Who else might they be? And working effectively with each of the key stakeholders is all about good collaboration. So a collaborative leader, the Institute says, works with diverse stakeholders, understands the team dynamics, accesses networks, and invests in relationships. So again, we can pick out some of those components within that collaboration element. So managing customer relationships, they're an external stakeholder. Actually, they might be a part of your team going forward, or an advocate for your work, or indeed providing the feedback that you need to adapt and improve the service offering that you might have as well. Being able to manage meetings, are you just chairing it? Are you just steamrolling everything through, or are you being collaborative? Are you seeking, are you dealing with conflict as well, and are you seeking others' ideas and thoughts and ways to take forward projects? So you'll see here on the slide that actually I've highlighted a few there, sort of real key ones. Team working is right there at the top of the components for collaboration. Building networks, so your team's starting to link up with other folks around it. Leading projects, directly relevant in there. Appreciating diversity, so taking different people's views into account. Engaging stakeholders, so ensuring that you have got the right inputs, and respecting different cultures as well. And that could be culturally within town, within a particular community, culturally just within different organizations. How do things work? You might be working with a partner and going, why is that slow, or what is the hold up there? And actually that's because there might be a different culture to the way of working, or the people that are involved in that. So working through how to respect different cultures within society, within communities, but also within ways of working with organizations. So have a think now about the these different dimensions, particularly these 5, which resonates with you and your idea of leading a team. So which of these dimensions are things that you think, oh yes, I do that. Perhaps think about particular components, or maybe I could do more of that. Just take a moment to think about those. Thank you. So I hope you've had a good thought process going through about what you believe are the qualities that you already possess and those that you might perhaps do more of, or now that they might start resonating perhaps with yourselves as to what your idea of leading a team well might be. So we're going to move on now to another model to have a bit of a think about in terms of particularly leading teams. As you'll see here, so this is John Adair's action-centered leadership, and team itself is just one of the circles in this diagram. There are 3 overlapping responsibilities. This is a trademarked model that was created. So you've got task, team, and individual all need to be considered when you are thinking about leading a team, when you're thinking about leading a project or program, and the people that are involved in that. So the first is about achieving the task. So what is it? What's the purpose of the task? What quality does it need to be done to? And how performance of that task will be monitored. So how are you going to think about that in and of itself? You might, within a task, sort of think about identifying aims and perhaps a vision for that. You might also think about identifying the resources, the people, the processes, systems, and the tools that might all come in as part of that as well. How are you going to achieve a particular task in that way? Then you might think a bit more about the team itself. So within a team or group, perhaps it's another way of looking at it or thinking about it, even if you're not quite sure, is this my team? But actually it's just the group or collective of people that might make something happen. So a team needs to have an agreed standard of communication, its own culture for operative working conditions. How do they work well together? How will the team function in pursuit of achieving the task that you might have laid out previously? There needs to be a level of maturity within the team and a collective understanding of each other's strengths and needs. So we started out with that sort of definition of a team earlier on, which was around that sort of complementary skills and roles. And it might be that you as a leader know each person's strengths, what their capabilities are, the skills that they possess. But actually, do each other know that, whether you're quite a small team or a larger team, sort of 10, 20 or more people? Who do you turn to? Where do you go? That's all about effective teamwork, effective team leadership, perhaps as well, ensuring that people know who to go to, that you're not creating artificial barriers by going, well, this needs doing, well, I need to go and speak to somebody up here, and perhaps become a bottleneck for dealing with those requests. We're going, oh yeah, go and speak to that person or something. So yeah, understanding each other's strengths and needs is really helpful for people to function as an effective team. So within that, yeah, you could establish, agree, communicate standards of performance and behavior. What is it that you might expect as the team leader there? You probably need to monitor and maintain discipline within the team. What are the ethics that you're holding your team to? Is there integrity? Have they got a focus on the objectives as a whole, sort of as a team? You might anticipate and resolve team conflict. So actually, are there struggles or disagreements that might be in place? Might you actually come up with that even ahead of time, going, well, there's this task that might go across a couple of people. Who's going to lead? Who's going to do what? So can you anticipate any of those conflicts? But how do you help as a leader resolve those? Assess and change as necessary the balance and composition of a team. That might be a controversial thought perhaps, but especially if we're thinking about sort of interdisciplinary teams or matrix teams where you might be working cross functions or with different suppliers as part of what you're doing. Indeed, if you're sort of bringing people on sort of short-term contracts or particular experts, then actually to achieve your objectives, to achieve what you want to do you need to change up who is part of that team. Can you encourage a team towards particular objectives and aims? How does that motivate people? Does it provide a collective sense of purpose if they're clear on what that team is trying to do? Then also identify, develop, and agree among the team, with the team, any sort of leadership roles that the group might have within that. Even if you are the team leader, maybe if you've got a larger team who is leading a particular project or leading an area of work, is that useful to have? So is everyone in your team on the same level, or are they actually working slightly more in sort of working groups or subgroups, or have their own line management within there as well, again, depending on the size and scale of what you're doing. So that's great. And then the last thing actually I'd say is within your team, how do you enable, facilitate, and ensure effective communications within that team, but also outside of your team? Again, we mentioned earlier, who are those partners, who else might be involved? We'll come on to stakeholders a bit more in a few minutes. But yeah, how can you enable, facilitate, and ensure you've got effective communications inside and outside your team? And the third ring here then is individual. So every team and indeed every task is delivered by a team. Every team have individuals. So the third rung here that is very important to really keep in consideration is that actually it's not one monolith. You're not one blob of people. Every individual will have their own skills and capabilities they bring to it, as per our definition earlier. So how do you assist and support individuals in performing their duties? The plans, problems or challenges they might face, what are the highs and lows that they might go through as an individual, whether that's in a short space of time or over a longer period, where's their development, what's going on, how do they contribute to the team as best as possible? And then can you identify and agree on appropriate individual responsibilities and objectives? Are there things that actually you're working towards as a team, but do certain individuals take control or ownership over certain areas that they're taking forward? Indeed, where appropriate, what reward do individuals get? Do they have extra responsibilities? Do they need to have an advancement or status within the organization? Where does the reward element sit? And is it team as a whole, or are there individual rewards that are going on? And can you identify, develop, and utilize each of the individual's capabilities and strengths? That's a real key thing here in terms of leadership, and in this sort of action-centered leadership model. Identifying, developing, and utilizing each of those individuals' capabilities and strengths. Really important to think of people as people. What do they bring to it? How do they help form the team? How can you build and foster a real sense of a productive team by knowing that and utilizing each of those individuals as best as possible? So think about that particular model a bit more as well, and we're going to now perhaps apply that somewhat back into those dimensions as well. So how do you demonstrate the dimensions of leadership, perhaps thinking about them a little bit in that model of action-centered leadership as well? Task, individual, team. Does it sit particularly within there? Where is the focus within these components? So how do you demonstrate the dimensions in your practice? Let's just take a moment to think about that. Perhaps scribble on Notepad or anything like that that's useful for you. Have a look at the components and go, okay, where is that applying in my practice now? Excellent. So I hope you've had a good chance to think about actually how some of these play into your own practice already now. And so now we're going to think about who's on your team. So actually, who are your stakeholders and what impact do they have on your team itself? So we mentioned earlier about actually, are they direct employees? Are they freelancers? Are they partners? Are they actually participants or beneficiaries, clients, service users, any of those phrases? But actually, can they be a part of your team? Are they helping you to have the impact that you want, particularly when it comes to community projects and programs? So who is really a part of your team? Also, do you see them in person? Today's world especially, we're all working all very differently. Some companies, some organizations are getting everybody in the office 5 days a week. Your project or program you're delivering, it might be very important that actually everyone is in person all of the time. Or Are your staff, are your team members communicating via app a lot of the time? Are they working remotely, or are you working hybrid? Some are in the office, some are not. Are they doing different shifts or different programs? Someone's running Monday and Wednesday night sessions, someone else is doing Tuesday and Thursday night sessions. But actually, are they all still part of one team, and do they need a way to communicate? So it's really important to think about, okay, who is on your team and how do they interact with your team itself? So this box model is something to consider. Essentially, there will be stakeholders that are linked to your work that have different degrees of influence and different degrees of importance or different degree of interest in the work that you're doing. So those that might have little influence and interest, they might still be a stakeholder. They might be just somebody that is out there that is aware of what you're doing. They might just be watching it from afar, in fact. So they've got a bit of an interest, but actually they don't directly control your budgets or something like that. So they're not influencing either. So they are someone that you might want to keep into account. So they are there in that sort of bottom left-hand corner, keeping account of what their needs and requirements might be when it comes to a project or program delivery, or indeed just actually your team within an organization. Do you need to think about, oh, okay, so that person is not directly involved right now, but should I keep account of the fact that they exist? You can think about who that might be for your team, for your organization as a whole. Some people might sort of think, okay, maybe it's an association or something. Probably not a regulator, because actually they probably have more influence over what's going on at some point if they decide to exercise it. But actually, could it be an association or professional body of some sort that actually, you know, you want to maintain the right ethics and values of your team, of the delivery that you're doing. So you need to keep in consideration what they say would be the right code of conduct or professional standards that should be left there. So maybe not to a statutory level, but certainly to a level of, okay, these are the right people. So you keep account of perhaps that type of stakeholder at this point. But stakeholders can move. So actually, if there's a problem or a complaint or something else that comes in, then that might start to move on this diagram as well. So someone you're not proactively engaging with, but actually they might become someone you need to proactively engage with in future. If they have a higher degree of interest, i.e., like I say, some sort of complaint comes in, or something where they need to monitor it. Let's take maybe an education sense, something comes up or is aware with, say, Ofqual. They might want to be kept in the loop, or to know what's going on, and monitoring perhaps how you might be evolving or delivering the sort of qualifications you might be doing with your community members or something, if that was to be a case. So it's just one of many examples, but you might want to keep them more informed. So you weren't necessarily, you were keeping account of perhaps the qualification standards or the needs of them, but at that point in time, you're just accounting for all of that. But now something might have come up, and now you need to keep them in the loop. So they're still not maybe having any particular power or influence over changing something that you are doing, but you do need to keep them in the loop. And that might, I'm talking externally there, but it could be internally. Maybe there's a senior leader or senior manager that actually they have a lot of interest in what you're doing, but right now they're empowering you and your team to get on with something. However, your monthly slide deck or project wins throughout a time period or something might be something that they want to be aware of, so you keep them informed. However, actually, a stakeholder might have perhaps little interest in what you're doing right now, but actually they do have a lot more power and influence. So maybe it is a budget holder, or perhaps it's a funder. You might want to think that certain types of funders might come into that area. So actually, they might in principle have a good interest, but they've got loads of people they're funding, so they're not taking a close interest. But actually, they have got the power to withdraw that funding from you or your project. So actually, you do need to meet their needs. What is it that they want to know about? What are the outcomes that you're achieving? It is something that actually you need to meet the needs of that funder to keep a program going. And now actually the next one, the fourth quadrant, is actually someone who has a lot of interest and also someone that has a lot of power or influence. So they might be someone that you need to manage closely. And that might be a whole variety of different people. It might actually be someone within your team, or a close colleague, or someone who actually they've got a lot of interest in what you're doing because they might be getting involved at some point themselves. But they might also have a lot of influence over what you're doing because they might be someone that is listened to within the organization, or might have new ideas, new ways of delivering a particular project or program. So again, someone like that you might want to manage closely. So actually, are they inside your team? You know, a lot of people that you might be managing more closely might be team members themselves because they can influence the direction of the project. They obviously have a big interest in it because it's their job. But you know, do also think about who that might be externally as well. Externally to your team, whether that's another organization or a partner that is helping you deliver or delivering a different part of your program or work. You probably need to manage them closely because if they don't do their job, maybe it makes your job harder, or whatever comes out of your part of the project is it something that they need to pick up on. So actually, if they kick up a fuss or something, actually, what's the influence they're going to have on the way in which you're managing your team and delivering your work afterwards as well. So those are the four quadrants. So little interest and power or influence would be people you keep in, you account for them, keep into account. Little interest, but more power and influence. You need to make sure you meet their needs. And then quite a bit of interest, but less power and influence. You are people that at least there and then, as I say, everyone can change, but are people that you might want to keep in the loop, keep informed. And then people who've got a lot more interest and a lot more power and influence are probably those that you need to manage closely. Now, of course, within that, you know, you can break those down even more within those. So it might be, you know, someone who's got a high interest and high influence over you, but actually they're sort of teetering on the edge there. So they're in the bottom left corner or something. So you want to manage them closely, but that manage closely might be, you know, have an hour meeting with them once a week as part of the project development or something. Or it's one that you need to manage so closely that actually you're in constant contact every day. So it will vary depending on the need of the team member, whether they're external, internal, and the context in which you're working. So yeah, think about, you know, where your immediate colleagues might sit. Who else do you need to work with to make your work happen? Have a think about that as well. So are there people that actually you don't really think about as part of your team or even the extended team, but they have a lot more influence over what your work is and how you're doing it? So just to come back to the question that I was posing at the start of this slide, and who are your stakeholders and what impact do they have on your team? Do just sort of think about that and take that forward in terms of plotting them in. Maybe make yourself a little 4-cell diagram bit like this at some point and just write into each quadrant, you know, some of the people that might be those with an interest or with influence, and just sort of see, you know, where do they sit? Are you currently meeting their needs? Are you actually keeping them informed as much as you think you should? So moving on a little bit, but very much linking to stakeholders here. Another chance for you to just think and contemplate here. What are the challenges motivating the stakeholders to work with you? So if you haven't been keeping people informed to this point, but actually you identify that they are someone that you should be keeping in the loop, okay, how do you now engage with them? How do you motivate those stakeholders to understand you and to work with you? That might be your immediate team. Had you actually maybe sort of thought, oh yeah, they're just cracking on over there, but you're not really managing them closely, even though they're part of the immediate team, and maybe you do need to engage them. Maybe they've got more influence than you thought they might have had to begin with. Maybe there's a direct line manager for yourself that actually has more influence than you might give them at this moment in time because you're quite independent and you're cracking on with your projects. So how do you motivate them to engage with you and deliver the right work? So that's your chance to really think about that. Hopefully, as per the last slide, you might start thinking about putting them down on a piece of paper. And now we'll think about actually how you might motivate them. So a lot of people have come across this particular hierarchy of needs. So Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Often what this basically suggests is that to motivate a team, you need to ensure the basic needs are met, and then sort of the psychological needs are met, and self-fulfillment or indeed actualization as you sort of move up through this particular triangle. So here we've got the physiological needs, in other words, potentially sort of basic needs, and safety needs. They're also basic, as in they need to happen there. Just if we don't have those things, you can't build on it. That's what this model is suggesting. And then you've got your psychological needs, your belongingness, that need to be loved, perhaps your relationships, friends. Do people sort of feel that emotional connection or empathy? And then you've got the esteem needs, so prestige or feeling of accomplishment. We mentioned earlier around achievement, as a team, as a leader. But do people feel that? Do they get recognized? Are they rewarded for what they've got in place there? And that came up in the action-centered leadership as well, about how you might reward individuals within the teams. And then you've got self-fulfillment, so this idea of self-actualization. So do they feel like they're achieving their full potential? Do they have the opportunity for creative activities, for doing different things that might be outside of their immediate role there as well? So fulfilling the basic needs means that you can move on to fulfilling perhaps the psychological needs, which can then top it off with an individual's self-fulfillment. And if they can get to that point, if they can feel that they are actually achieving their full potential, they will no doubt give the most that they can to you as a leader, to the team, to the project or the community work that you might be doing as well. So that's one particular model. It's on the handout, the resources available alongside this webinar and video. We'll move on to another sort of motivational theories here, something called Theory X and Theory Y. This has been something that's been around for a while, has developed perhaps over the sort of business sort of cases over the years, the different academic interest. It's something again for you to contemplate on, to take from the resource, to have a look at it and go, okay, what is motivating my team members? And are they being motivated as my internal team members, or are they being motivated as external team members, motivated to engage with you, to be those stakeholders that are actually a part of your extended team? So are they being coerced or controlled? Are they motivated by money? Perhaps that sort of thing would be Theory X in here. So you can see here on this particular description that there's a few areas which sort of compare the two: attitude, direction, responsibility, motivation, and creativity. So on Theory X, what it's sort of saying, they dislike work, they find it boring, they'll avoid work if they can. That's the sort of attitude. But they must be forced or coerced into the right direction to deliver. So actually what's motivating them is the fact that they're told what to do. Responsibility, to be directed. They'd rather do that than accept responsibility. So they sort of try to avoid that. Motivation in and of itself, they're motivated by money and perhaps fear of losing their job, or not having job security. So the driver there is that sort of fear response, and it's a controlled response. And generally speaking, they've got less creativity, suggest here, perhaps except when it comes to getting around rules in there. But so Theory X is very much about those who are come there, do the job, head home again. Are they achieving their full potential? Are they doing more? Are they going the extra mile? Are they, is there that self-actualization at the top of that triangle? Not necessarily, but it might be what motivates them to get on with the job is they come, they're told what to do, they know what they're doing, they get on with it, and they don't want to lose their job. That's great, they've done that and they head home. Or do we look at Theory Y, which is much more around sort of, actually their own involvement and motivated by what they can achieve as being part of that team. So we need to work on, we need to work and want to take an interest in the task, in the project, in what's going on there. That's the attitude they've got. They can enjoy it in the right conditions. The directions that they direct themselves, perhaps a bit more independent. There's a target, they're working towards it. They might take responsibility, might even seek some responsibility within the project or within the team to do that as well. Their motivation there is around their, realizing their own potential, actually what the desires they have. They want to progress and move on. And they might have the opportunity for creativity. Sort of rarely, it might be that creatives aren't always recognized in the way that they should be, and the problem-solving skills and things that are there, but actually they would be motivated by the opportunity to get creative, to think of new ideas, to problem solve, to deliver on the project, the community work, or the task at hand. So that's a sort of comparison somewhat there between theory X and theory Y. So again, theory X motivated by money and the notion of not losing their job or something. So it's a bit more come and do the job, go home. Theory Y might be more motivated by actually the task, the impact that they're having in the community, by being given the opportunity to do more, perhaps to take responsibility. So it's about the role, the task, the impact that they're having more than the money side, perhaps in there. But something that, unless you do maybe business courses or something, isn't always considered is another one called Theory Z. And this has come about from Dr. William Ucci some years ago. And it just adds another dynamic, perhaps, to this. So it's more about the team involvement and more collective responsibility. So rather than that autocracy, rather than going, here's the task, here's how you do it, that'd be sort of theory X. Here's the task, this is what we need to achieve, how are you going to go on, how are you going to do it? That's theory Y. Theory Z might be, so here's what we need to achieve, but actually what's the task breakdown there? Who's going to do what? How are we going to achieve that together? That's essentially the sort of the crux of the difference between theory X, Y, and Z there. And again, all available in the handouts and resources accompanying this. But just add a bit more around that sort of theory Z. Again, this model here has just got a bit of a comparison. So the view of work here, a whole part of a person, but actually it is a part of the person. Someone is there to work because they want to. They might take collective responsibility. They want to be a part of that decision-making process, perhaps. And their attitude towards innovation, I think this is a great one there, that the whole is better than the sum of the parts. So actually they bring, as we talked about earlier in the session, everyone has their own skills, capabilities. Actually, if you bring that together and you get the right mix, even if you have to change it up and balance it, as we also said, but if you've got that right mix of people, actually the outcome can be much greater than the sum of the parts in itself. So that's great. This ability to control is an interesting comparator among these. So an implicit control by loyalty to the team. So actually how you as a leader, you still have a level of management responsibility, have a, how do you get a team to do what it needs to do by the end of it? Actually, the control that you might be exercising for Theory Z is an implicit control because they're loyal to the team, because you've really fostered that notion that they want to be a part of it, that they want to take responsibility within there. So we compare that back to Theory Y, so that's self-direction, self-control. Like I say, you lay out the target and they sort of perhaps look at how they achieve that, they want to fulfill it. Whereas in Theory X, it's a bit more coerced or controlled. It uses the word threatened here, but that notion of that fear of losing a job perhaps. So those are perhaps drivers to the control that you might exercise as a leader or manager. So maybe perhaps think about, how is it that you like to lead your teams here? What sort of motivation area is it that you like to exercise right now? So I hope you've had a good opportunity to think about actually how you motivate your teams, which of these theories might work for the individuals that you are leading or managing at the moment within your team. It's worth bearing in mind that not every individual will possess every aspect of a particular theory. Actually, might they move what motivates them over time? Does it depend on their own circumstances and what the sort of culture of the organization is able to offer? And something to keep in mind is that often perhaps in a micro organization, you might have more opportunity to motivate around Theory Z, or people join it to be a part of that closer working team, take collective responsibility. Perhaps in a small charity, more likely people are very much there because they want to be there and support the impact of that organization. And perhaps there's more people that might be motivated on that sort of Theory Y approach. And perhaps in a much larger charity, there's opportunities for roles that are a little bit more sort of factory line or systematic and process driven, or opportunities for sort of small jobs that are about maybe helping to raise some funds for an organization, or to do certain processes, and maybe they are there a bit more for the paycheck because it's a job that they want to do, and they're not so bothered whether it is helping local communities or animals or other community benefit, but actually they're there because it pays them at the end of the day as well. But that doesn't mean to say that they don't like what they're doing or they don't value the organisation, but they might not be as invested perhaps in the organisation yet. And like I say, it's more likely to be in a much larger organisation. But you will find, you know, every individual will be motivated in their own ways as well. So speaking of individuals, our last thing to consider is actually how people fulfill their team roles. So I've got here the Belbin team roles, which I find a really interesting, really useful way of I would say categorizing people, and actually everybody is individual, everyone is unique, and you need to very much recognize that and bring to the front what does this person offer the team, how can we best utilize them. However, the idea of the Belbin team roles is that actually most people will fall primarily into one of the categories and have to a certain degree another category or two or even three. You know, it's perhaps a bit of a percentage of how individuals operate and what those roles are. So again, detail and information available on the handouts and resources available alongside this. So we'll start with the resource investigator. So they use their inquisitive nature to find ideas to bring back to the team. A team worker. So it helps the team to gel. They use their versatility to identify the work required and complete it on behalf of the team. So they're very much about contributing into the team itself, whereas the first one might be a bit more bringing stuff back to the team, finding out the information to begin with. The third one is a coordinator. So perhaps they need to focus on the team's objectives. They draw out team members and then delegate work appropriately. Whether they're leader or not, actually, they might know the different skill sets of the different team members, and they drive towards that sort of objective. So perhaps a level of natural leadership going on in there. Then there's a plant. A plant tends to be highly creative and good at solving problems in unconventional ways. So think perhaps creative thinkers in particular, and we always need these plants around to maybe approach something in a slightly different way to what might first be perceived as. Then we've got monitor and evaluator. So they provide a logical eye. They're making impartial judgments where required, and they weigh up sort of the team's options, usually in a more dispassionate way. So they're sort of taking that logical brain to it as well. So someone that can look at the data, look at the information, and that might be more of a monitor evaluator type role. And then the sixth one here, we've got specialists. So they bring an in-depth knowledge of a key area to the team. So linking back to what we were saying earlier around team members, you might have a multidisciplinary team. You might have someone who is core, who's a full-time employee, who's a particular specialist, or do you bring in freelancers? Do you bring in people with particular expertise for a shorter period of time? That again can all be a part of, you know, adapting a team to what you need to deliver the best impact to a community. The seventh one here, so we've got a shaper. So providing the necessary drive to ensure that the team keeps moving and does not lose focus or momentum. So actually, are they potentially that person that really does help to motivate a team, whether that is because they are perhaps the class clown, but in a good way, keeps them entertained, keep people happy and productive in that way. Are there other methods that perhaps a shaper uses to keep people motivated and trying to work at speed, whether that is, oh, we got the deadline here, when's that? But you have got that sort of shaper role who's really focused on keeping things going very much. And then implementer, needed to plan a workable strategy and carry it out as efficiently as possible. So an implementer is about that person who will look at the best way to achieve something in their opinion, perhaps in the team's opinion, and then it's about how can we do that efficiently. So slightly more process oriented, perhaps, slightly less about what are the creative different ways. Oh, no, this is a way that works. This is how we can do it efficiently. Let's get on with it. And then lastly, number 9 here is the completer finisher. So most effectively used at the end of the tasks. this particular role, this person. They would polish a task, perhaps. They would scrutinize the work for any errors. They would essentially subject it to the highest standards of quality control. And that doesn't mean to say it has to be something that is just written down. That could be actually looking at a project and going, right, have we achieved all the outcomes that we wanted to? Has it had a good impact, or where might we have had more of an impact? Perhaps they're reviewing, the project a bit later on. Have they got that ability to see through the gaps or see through what has happened and how it might be improved in future? But also ensuring that perhaps if it is something just before it's going out somewhere, or it's perhaps the task is about a designed program, can they think about, oh, we've missed this opportunity, or we've missed the fact that this might have an impact? So those are 9 roles. I've just given you very brief sort of descriptions on where they sit. So perhaps you can start thinking a bit about, them in your team. Who do you think might fulfill some of those team roles? Like I said, they're not just going to be one. You might often find someone has more of one in them than others. But you might think, oh, okay, well, Joe over here, they've got at least 2 of those. They're a bit of a plant, but they're also a coordinator. And yeah, you think about them. And the idea being that you do need all 9 of these in your team. Even if you've got a team of 3 people, like I say, they might, have to a different degree, different elements of these team roles. But do think about actually, if they're going to be complementary, what are the roles that they're bringing? Do you have these different types of people? And does that make, therefore, a productive team that is working very much for you and for your communities or the service users at the end of it? So that is everything for the session today. A number of different models that we've covered off, a number of ideas that I hope are starting to enable you to think about things and to take things forward as much as you possibly can to fostering a productive team that works for you. Thanks for joining us.